Next, Senator Wyden. First of all, I want to just tell you, Senator, how much I appreciate. I know many people in the country appreciate. You've been a leader in healthcare for years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bills you've introduced, modifications of healthcare reform that you've introduced, and frankly, I cannot think of a senator who spent more time, a higher percentage of his or her time on healthcare than you over the last several years. And frankly, many of the provisions we have here are due to you, due to your hard work and effort. You've led the way. You've plowed a lot of ground here, and I want to thank you for it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for those kind words. And I don't want to make this a bouquet tossing contest, but
Well, that's okay. We can toss back and forth.
You have made an extraordinary effort in all of these many months to bring us together. We wouldn't even be here without the superb white paper that you put out to start this discussion. And let me begin by saying that I guess you didn't get the memo from the folks on the ideological extremes of American politics who said, Max, you ought to throw in the towel on bipartisanship. You either didn't get it or you wisely chose to ignore it. And as far as I'm concerned, the country is for the better because of your focus on bipartisanship. You consistently said, let's try to get here through consensus rather than confrontation. And despite a popular myth among some people, it's impossible to enact comprehensive health reform with a 51-vote partisan effort. So the fact is, the way you have approached it, trying to reach across the aisle, was the only responsible course of action. So, despite the exhaustive efforts of the chairman, the committee now finds itself short on both real reform and Democrats and Republicans having their names on this mark and this legislation. So the actions of this committee from this day on are going to go a long way towards determining whether the Congress will remain largely empty-handed on bipartisanship and real reform. My vote in the committee is going to depend to a great extent on whether we can get on that real road to meaningful reform and bipartisanship. And having spent a pretty fair amount of time, like a lot of colleagues here, in the bipartisan precincts of health reform, my sense is you start with three principles. The first is truth-telling. You cannot truthfully argue that you can change American health care and then list all the parts of the system that are going to stay exactly as they are. The truth-telling in bipartisan health reform efforts means telling folks that tough choices have to be made, saying no when you'd rather say yes, and above all, showing leadership, persuading people to accept reforms that they would otherwise resist. The second part of bipartisanship is acknowledging that each party has a valid point. I think our party is absolutely right that you cannot fix this unless all Americans get good quality, affordable coverage. Otherwise, you have too much cost shifting, not enough prevention. Our party's right. You have to have coverage for all people. Our friends on the other side of the aisle have valid points, too. You need a real role for the market, for private choices, for making sure you don't freeze innovation, melding those two principles together. Democrats on coverage, expanding coverage, and Republicans on choice and markets and a role for the private sector is, in my view, getting real reform. And finally, I believe real reform isn't about bringing together a who's who of healthcare lobbies to sign off on legislation. Slowing and disrupting the price escalators in American healthcare that threaten the economy is much more important than reeling in yet another of these powerful interest groups. Let me wrap up by talking a bit about the bill specifics. The chairman's mark does some very good things. I want to repeat that. Some very good things. Yet there is still a lot to do to place the country on the road to real reform. First, the bill does not hold insurance companies accountable. The bill does not force insurance companies to compete for our business. The bill denies choice of coverage to over 200 million Americans. Now, the president at every rally across the country says you can keep what you have, and that is great. This bill, in its current form, stipulates that while you can keep what you have, if you don't like what you have, you've got to keep it. You're stuck. You're denied the chance to get something better. You can't go into the marketplace as part of a large group with real bargaining power and force the insurance companies to give you a better deal. Real reform, colleagues, is saying you can keep what you have, but it is also saying if you don't like what you have, you can get something better. And we only need to look at the automobile insurance market to see that's the way it works. If your car insurance company jerks you around when you file your first claim, if they fail to provide enough money in the repair or they attempt to avoid paying for the repairs, you whip out the yellow pages, you go to a new company. The choice amendment that I will be offering is built around the magical words of the American system: competition, the marketplace, empowering the individual. It is the bottom line of health reform, because in this health system, for too long, the system has been shielded from the powers of choice and competition. Now, I know that I am taking on what amounts to the status quo caucus. There are very powerful insurance lobbies who like their protected lobby. There are a lot of interests who feel that having a captive workforce is profitable to them, but it is up to us to choose whose interest, the public's or the status quo coalition, gets to shape this legislation. Mr. Chairman, I think that we can do better. I like a lot of what's in the bill. The way that you go to bat for low-income people, the people who are walking on an economic tightrope every single day, balancing their food bills against their medical bills, this is extraordinarily important to our country. But let us do better. And for example, rather than saying we're going to give people an exemption from having health insurance, during this markup, let's start with the principle that we're going to stay at it until every American is guaranteed quality, affordable coverage. I'll have amendments in that regard, and I close with this. This bill, for a lot of colleagues, is not their first choice. It's not exactly a surprise. I'm one of them. But this debate isn't about any of us individually. It's not about getting a political win for one party or another. It's about getting a win for the health and economic security of the American people. I consider this, Mr. Chairman, the most important bill I have ever worked on. It is something I've been interested in since the days when I was director of the Gray Panthers. I'm committed to working with you and colleagues on both sides of the aisle to stay at it until we get it right.
Thank you, Senator. Your statement indicates how long you've worked in healthcare reform, and I especially appreciate your comments about competition and choice, and not being stuck with your employer if you want to, go someplace else and want to have good health insurance. As you well know, this legislation through the exchange is creating a competition and choice for individuals who can choose a plan they may want to have. But second, we're working with you to help make it easier for somebody to get health insurance if he or she wants to move someplace else and is worried about keeping a plan that he or she now has. So we've got some ideas how to accomplish that even further, but thank you very much for your efforts here. You're welcome.